Well, welcome everyone. We are live now at the Get Out the Vote Diversity, the U.S. and the Corporate Response. We will be getting started here momentarily. We want to thank everyone who has joined in and is watching us live. Thank you so much for being a part of this conversation tonight. And I am excited to introduce our amazing panel tonight. We have some distinguished speakers that are going to be with us presenting, and it is going to be a phenomenal conversation. We want to start with our introductions, and I will start with none other than Dr. Tony Flowers. Dr. Flowers is the president and CEO of Maritime Executive Consulting, a consulting leadership development firm that assists clients with various strategies that navigate the processes of organizational and professional change. Most recently, Tony was employed at Roper St. Francis Health as the organization's inaugural vice president and chief diversity and inclusion officer. And the health system is comprised of 4 hospitals, 125 outpatient facilities, and a workforce of about 5,000. Dr. Flowers is an award-winning diversity professional, honored on 2 separate occasions to serve as the organization's premier chief diversity and inclusion officer, identified as one of 50 great African-American health administrators to know. She was the vice chair and executive committee member of the Institute for Diversity and Health Equities, IFDHE, as well as American Leadership Council for Diversity in Healthcare Management. She is nationally recognized as a trainer on the topics of diversity strategy and action planning, customer experience, health equity, cultural competency, and beyond. Welcome, Dr. Flowers.
It's my pleasure to be here. Thank you.
We're so glad to have you. Next, Dr. Stefan Reeves, as I call him. He basically is a doctor to me because he plays so many roles in my life. But Stefan is a Jamaican-born entrepreneur with over 12 years experience in consulting and business development. His journey led him from Jamaica in 1987, where he began his education. He moved to Philadelphia and started a successful consulting career in the software and telecommunications industries. Always a consummate entrepreneur, Reeves collaborated with friends to begin a company that assisted independent school arenas increase their diversity. And they were very successful in that effort, which was the launch of Montage Diversity Consultants. And that company has grown into Montage Companies and has an amazing influence around the world. As a facilitator, Mr. Reeves has presided over various workshops on diversity and inclusion topics, including cultural competency, diverse personnel recruiting, retention, diversity initiative planning, and so much more. Please join me in welcoming Stefan to the conversation today. And last but definitely not least, Cheryl Thompson is just an amazing person. I have had the privilege of getting to know her in the professional space, specifically the automotive and mobility industry. And it has been such a pleasure to get to know Cheryl. And anyone that knows her will say the same. Cheryl is the founder of the Center for Automotive Diversity, Inclusion, and Advancement in the city of Detroit. And this is an organization focused on supporting the automotive industry in developing and executing diversity and inclusion strategic initiatives for competitive advantage. CADIA's leadership development programs focus on supporting women and diverse talent in the automotive and manufacturing industries by working with them to overcome the unique obstacles and roadblocks that they face in building substantive career paths that integrate with their personal lives. Cheryl has over 30 years of experience at Ford Motor Company, and as well as American Axle and manufacturing in positions ranging from skilled trades, operations, engineering, and global leadership. Cheryl has been recognized as a 2019 Influential Women in Manufacturing honoree, a 2019 Corp Magazine Salute to Diversity Award winner, and she is also the recipient of 2 Diversity and Inclusion Awards from Ford Motor Company. Cheryl has performed keynotes as well as breakouts for a number of companies and events, including TED Talks in Windsor, Women in Manufacturing, the 2018 American Automotive Summit, and the Society of Women Engineers. Cheryl, we welcome you to this conversation today and are so thrilled that you've taken the time to be a part of it as well.
Well, thank you, Dexter. I'm very happy to be here. Thank you.
Absolutely, absolutely. Well, we are off to the races here, and I am really excited just to be able to speak with these leaders in the diversity space about some of the things that are going on in our country. And I believe that we will all be better after hearing their perspective on a number of things that are all very important to those of us that are on the call today. And so, with that, I want to start the conversation off very generally, but just to get a pulse, if we could all take maybe just 1 or 2 minutes and share a little bit about how you're feeling about the climate in the country and the work that you're doing and the value that diversity, equity, and inclusion really means in 2020. Starting with Dr. Flowers, then Stefan, and we'll end with Cheryl.
Sure. This, being a child, giving away my age, being a child of the 60s, I was born shortly after the major issues that were happening, shortly after the civil rights movement, all the many deaths that occurred, the sacrifices of so many, and I moved to Detroit just as the fires from the riots were just simmering. And seeing the racial divide that existed during that time, it just feels like the same thing over again. I think our country is so polarized now, it's so much more polarized now, even I think than back then. And as I am primarily work in healthcare, but also in other areas of the business sector, a place where you don't want the issues of race and discrimination to come up because we're dealing with life and death situations. And so for me, right now, I am encouraged by the number of businesses that I see that are investing in chief diversity and inclusion officers and who are promoting people of diverse backgrounds into their leadership positions. So I'm encouraged by that. But I also know that often it's reactionary. And I wonder if 5 years from now, will those people still have their jobs? Will that trend still be happening? So I'm encouraged, but I'm also skeptical. I am encouraged also by the young people that are not willing to tolerate the status quo. I love millennials and I love the tenacity and the passion that they have and recognize that they have really never lived in a world that wasn't diverse. I have twins that are 13 and they've always had friends who were from different ethnic groups. That was not my experience growing up initially, but I believe that they are the ones that are going to be changing the world. And so I am encouraged, and I do think that there is opportunity ahead for beauty to come out of the chaos.
Wonderful. I guess the same, some of the same sentiments for me, Dexter and Dr. Flowers and team. You know, it's as Dexter mentioned earlier, I came from Jamaica when I was 11 years old, and I moved directly to Connecticut. Actually, was where I first came to, and I went to public school for 1 year at Ponus Ridge Middle School. Which was the feeder school for a high school that was probably one of the poorest in the area. My mother, God bless her soul, recognized that has always been an educator back in Jamaica and has always been constantly going to school as long as I can remember. And she said, well, you know what, I've done my research and I believe that the independent school or the prep school arena is where I would like you to get your education. So I started after 1 year in public school. I went to independent schools for the rest of the way, and that was probably from 7th grade on through 12th grade. That was actually one of the motivators that helped me to start, led me to start Montage Diversity Consultants, because the journey that I had, although it was a very rich educational perspective, it was not as diverse an environment or inclusive as an environment as as one would have hoped. There were about 7 of my friends from high school, African American, Hispanic, Latino backgrounds, who we have kept lifelong friends as a part of stemming from that experience. We actually were ones who started Montage Diversity Consultants together, and our goal was to go back into the independent school arena and help them go through that cultural transformation. What you'll see now, you'll actually probably start seeing it, Black at on Instagram for Black at, whatever the name of the independent schools are. If you want to check that out, you'll start seeing some of the stories come to light of experiences that were really very, very challenging for people of color in the independent school arena. I feel like incredibly blessed because there weren't as many racially motivated issues. They were definitely some socioeconomically economic motivated issues, because those schools typically have very affluent families who, in the grander scheme of the economy in the world, have some real power. So it was, my journey again has been an interesting one. And after starting Montage Diversity Consultants and working with school districts and school systems and seeing some of the inequities, not only in how they conducted business and how they dealt with doing business with women and minority-owned firms in especially cities that are very diverse, more diverse cities like Philadelphia, where there's 60 plus 65% people of color, 70% people of color in the city. These schools and school district municipalities were not taking the right steps to provide an equitable business environment. When you look at how the schools were distributing their education and instruction, that was also and still tends to be very, very unequally distributed. So, stemming from the times from when we started the organization, the Montage Diversity Consultants, we've worked with from schools to municipalities to corporations, and it has been a very, very slow change. What Dr. Flowers just mentioned is that we see spikes of interest and spikes of potential change over the last 50 years, really stemming from 60 years, stemming from the civil rights movement, and with the current administration and the policies that they have put in place, and some of the internal memos that they've put forth in terms of diversity and inclusion, and those types of training practices that happen throughout the federal government. We see these things happening, and we are reminded that we are still really deeply engaged in quite an intense battle, for lack of a better word. We have young Black men and young Black women fighting for their lives out there. We have people of color and women who have been disenfranchised in the corporate arena at the very top. So it's not on one level, Dexter and team and everybody else. We seem to be seeing this on all levels through education, healthcare, automotive, and of course now one of the big industries, technology and telecommunications. These are going to be the jobs of the future. Mobility, the jobs and careers of the future need to have open access and create access pathways for women, minorities, people of color, African Americans, and we need to do that now. So I really do feel that the energy is there. We do see corporations from all various sizes starting to lift their heads and saying, we're really interested in starting to do something, but a lot, again, are unsure of what to do. There are opportunities to gain that support and become a part of a greater ecosystem. So we're just very excited to be a part of it. And thanks for having my perspective. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Stephen. Cheryl?
Yes, wow. Such an interesting time we're living in. I also am optimistic. I have seen great change. So being in the automotive industry for over 30 years, in Detroit at the Rouge Complex, I was definitely a minority, racial and gender. So, spent a long time being the only one in the room, being the only one in the factory for many years. So this has always been a topic that has been of interest. And I actually retired and started a business to help women in the automotive industry. Quickly found out that I needed to expand that to all dimensions of diversity, because I truly believe when we have more diversity in leadership overall, it helps women. And when we have more women in leadership, it's going to help everybody.
Mhm.
So when the pandemic hit, diversity and inclusion went on the back burner for many, many companies. So it was very disappointing to see. It was a little bit exhausting. And then all of a sudden, after George Floyd's murder, everybody was interested again. And so it was very inspiring, very energizing to see the corporate response and also the response from the young people. I've also seen in the corporate world, millennials are changing the world. They're not tolerating the things my generation tolerated.
Mhm.
And so I'm very, very hopeful. I think that things are a mess because we're in an election. And I also feel like, the power and influence that some have held is being challenged. And I have to read this quote. Marianne Williamson, if you're familiar with her, she was a presidential candidate. And she has this quote: "Love brings up everything unlike itself, so the soul can purge itself of our barriers to love. The grief, loss, shame, and rage we encounter can be devastating, but on the other side of the storm, we emerge reborn." And I just think we're at this point now where everything is just coming up to kind of come to the surface. Like we're getting rid of all those toxins. And on the other side of this, we're going to see growth and change. And the people that I encounter, the people that I work with in the automotive industry, I talk to a lot of leaders. We're in talking to C-suites. We're in doing training. We're talking to CEOs about change. And what I'm hearing from them is they don't want to work on fluff. The comment I heard was, I don't want any cotton balls, right? I don't want window dressing. I want real change, and I want it to be sustained. And when I ask people, what's your biggest hope and your fear about starting your journey? Because many of these companies are just starting off. The biggest fear is it won't be sustained. So I'm very hopeful and optimistic, and I'm still learning in this space as well. Being white, I'm doing a lot more listening after George Floyd's murder. I definitely had my eyes open. I've learned a lot. And when this ban first came out, I thought about it and I said, okay, we're in an election. This kind of stuff happens. But then the order got extended, and I read the order that was written and then discarded, and that one really concerned me because it banned all diversity and inclusion training. So I'm learning. I'm really inspired by all of the great organizations that are standing up and responding to this order. I'm also very inspired by all of the great organizations out there supporting each other. So I think we're in an interesting time, and I can't wait to see what's next.
Absolutely. And Cheryl, I just want to applaud the work that you do every day. And you have already said it, but I want to acknowledge your bravery and your heroiness as a white woman championing diversity, equity, and inclusion. It's absolutely phenomenal. I mean, I love getting to work with you and having the privilege of interacting with you professionally, through the work week and the things that you're doing here in the city of Detroit. But I think a lot of times we don't fully appreciate the weight and the meaning behind some of the decisions that we make. And as you were sharing about your experience at Rouge through the years, you've experienced being the minority in a space where there was a different majority. And that is that's a very unique experience for the majority to have. And so we recognize that, we honor that, and we appreciate what you bring to the table day in and day out. I want to
Thank you.
absolutely, absolutely. I want to read something, and then Dr. Flowers, I want to turn to you to give us a little bit of context about this bill, not bill, but this White House
Executive
ban
order.
and executive order that was a memo. I actually want to read some of that memo just so that people have an understanding of what we're actually talking about. And I want us to pay attention to the language, because words matter, and the things that we write, the things that we put out, all of that has consequence. So I just want us to hear this, and hear this as a document that is coming from the highest office in the land, the United States of America, to the American people. Okay, it reads, "It has come to the president's attention," meaning this just is flabbergasting to me. It's like it wasn't a part of his attention, but it has just come to his attention in the last year of his first term of presidency, that the executive branch agencies have spent millions of taxpayer dollars to date training government workers to believe divisive anti-American propaganda. So we're categorizing diversity, equity, and inclusion training as anti-American propaganda. Okay, next paragraph. For example, this is the actual memo. For example, according to press reports, not facts, reports, across the executive branch have been required to attend trainings where they are told that virtually all white people contribute to racism, or where they are required to say that they benefit from racism. According to press reports, in some cases, these trainings have further claimed that there is racism embedded in the belief that America is the land of opportunity, or the belief that the most qualified person should receive a job. These types of trainings not only run counter to the fundamental beliefs for which our nation has stood since its inception, but they also engender division and resentment within the federal workforce. We can be proud that as an employer, the federal government has employees of all races, ethnicities, and religions. We can be proud that Americans from all over the country seek to join our workforce and dedicate themselves to public service. We can be proud our continued efforts welcome individuals who seek to serve their fellow Americans as federal employees. However, we cannot accept our employees receiving training that seeks to undercut our values as Americans and drive division within our workforce. This next one is the last one that I'll read. I won't read the entire thing, but I'll just read this bit. The president has directed me to ensure that federal agencies cease and desist from using taxpayer dollars to fund these divisive, un-American propaganda training sessions. According to that end, the Office of Management and Budget will shortly issue more detailed guidance on implementing the president's directive. In the meantime, all agencies are directed to begin to identify contracts and agency spending related to any training on critical race theory, white privilege, or any training propaganda effort that teaches or suggests either that the United States is an inherently racist or evil country, or that any race or ethnicity is inherently racist or evil. It goes on and on, but I wanted just to give that so that there's a little bit of understanding. There are some things in this that are somewhat encouraging, that there is some effort to see inclusion and equity, but as diversity professionals that have given your lives to this field and to developing your craft, what are your thoughts on a memo like this, just kind of discounting in a blanket statement so much work that's been done? I mean, I think back to women's rights, the Civil Rights Act for African Americans and other ethnicities to have voting privileges. So just thinking back to our history and kind of where we've come in diversity and equity and inclusion, we want to just respond and get an understanding of to what this means. Dr. Flowers, and then, of course, Stephanie and Cheryl, you respond as you desire.
Sure. Well, when I became aware of the executive order, I wasn't totally surprised because to me, it seemed to be another effort to again polarize the country. There have been so many professionals, there have been so many scholars, there's been so much work to prove that systemic racism exists. The Institutes of Medicine did a report, I believe it came out in, I think it came out in 2001, and it was called Unequal Treatment. And that report was so large, the body of studies that prove that discrimination takes place in healthcare, to prove that racism is embedded systemically into healthcare institutions, that prove that people of color and other diversities are getting unequal treatment. Practitioners such as myself, we knew that this was true. We all had stories to support that this was true. But when that report came out, and I will say that report because it was a collection, a huge body of research to prove that these things exist. And literally this, the idea of implicit bias, and I'm really gonna age myself here, but remember the first time you were looking for mercury in a thermometer. You didn't know what it was, but somebody told you it was there. But once you finally were able to see, oh, it looks like water. Oh, that's it. Then you can never not see it. Well, it's the same thing with racism. Once you are sensitized to understand how it appears, then you can never not see it. So for our president, who is not a scholar, our president who is not a professional in this area, to discount all of the body of knowledge that has been published, produced for over 50 years, to me, that was insane. Also to recognize that this impacts every department under the executive branch of the government. And I'm just gonna read a few of those departments and think about how does this really impact the people who are served by these departments? The Department of Justice, the Department of Education, the Department of Labor, the Department of Commerce, the Department of Veteran Affairs, Housing and Urban Development, Homeland Security, Health and Human Services, and Transportation. So think about those individuals that live in rural areas that are dependent on transportation and that may not have it. Those individuals who are on Medicaid or Medicare, those individuals who are teaching and providing services. We know specifically in healthcare that there is a lack of diversity in nurses and doctors and other healthcare professions. So when we have cross-cultural relationships with our patients, not knowing how our biases can impact their healthcare outcomes really does mean the difference between life and death. So when we recognize that to stop, to cease and desist, I think that those were the words, this training, and it's almost immediate. So once it was signed, went into action. And for those vendors that provide services or contractors and subcontractors that provide those services, we recognize that that means they're not able to provide that service to those providers who don't understand culture, who don't understand how their biases and their culture can impact the outcome of those that they're serving. Then again, to me, that means those that are the most fragile, those that are the most in need are going to be the ones that suffer. And the whole issue around critical race theory, it really is a lens of being able to look at different situations and circumstances to examine institutions through a lens of racism. It is not denying the fact that we live in a racist society. None of us on this panel would have jobs if this wasn't a racist society. There wouldn't be a need for us if it wasn't a racist society. And so that theory has given us terminologies and ways to discuss these issues, like looking at housing segregation, looking at discriminatory labor practices, looking at bank lending, predatory lending, looking at access to education. It's given us terms like microaggressions, which is something that if you don't know, that diversity is a discipline that has its own nomenclature, just like medicine does. And so because of us being able to see what others don't see and to shine a light on it and to bring it out in the open and then begin to deal with the hairy monster that's in the middle of the room. To say then that this is un-American, to say that this is propaganda, to me, it really is embarrassing that we have a leader that does not understand that this is one of the ways that's helping us to understand each other as the country becomes more diverse, and it's only going to continue to become more diverse. It's important for us to understand each other and to understand that this is the country that said, the Statue of Liberty says, give me your, and you fill in the blank, because that's all of those aspects of diversity. Give me your.
Wow, well said. I don't know if I can follow that. I love what you just said about, you know, this tool has been taken away for us to be able to understand each other and to have that dialogue. And that's unfortunate. And you're in an industry where it matters the most. It's an issue of life and death. And we're in the middle of a global pandemic. What more of an important time to be able to have these discussions? And I guess the lens I'm looking at it through is, you know, you said that our country is becoming more diverse. I think it's this year, 2020, where 50.2% of the population under the age of 18 will come from an ethnic or minority race. And so when I think about workforce development and the socioeconomic gap that exists today, we're going to lose that tool to be able to talk about this and understand and open up opportunities and expose people to wonderful, lucrative careers, right? And advancement in those careers to get to the leadership positions at the top where systemic change can be made and where the power and the influence lies. So I'm just still in disbelief. I can't believe that there's an order out there like this.
So, you know, it's and again, I share the same sentiments, but it's, you know, Dexter just mentioned how important the words are, and I think we probably all know how the current administration has used language in order to, again, to divide the population and also to misguide some of the population as well. This order was actually an internal memo. So it was a memo and not necessarily a presidential order that was a bill or signed. So it was a suggestion to all of those departments across the government. It was about 4 days after, or maybe not 4 days, maybe about 2 weeks after this internal memo / order was released, where my company, we were contacted by the Navy, and the Navy, they have a part of the Navy called NAVC. They basically handle all the logistics for all of the ships, and you know, they know where every single ship is and every piece of a bolt that goes on a ship, and they manage and operate the logistics for all of the Navy. They have about 82,000 employees. They reached out about 2 weeks after that memo, and they were still moving forward with their quote unquote diversity and inclusion trainings. Interestingly enough, they have about 2,700 employees locally in Philadelphia, and they were still moving forward with an initial pilot, and then continuing to move forward with their diversity inclusion training. So I'm saying that to say that President Trump was very forthcoming in terms of what he wanted to misguide everyone to think that this was the law of the land, when in fact it was not the law of the land. So I do know that there are a number of internal departments there that are still moving forward with diversity and inclusion, so on and so forth. Again, what he has done with that is to really add weight or we're really not advocating really to take away from, again, all the work that has been done, the groundwork that has been laid, and really in, an afternoon, just to totally erode a lot of progress that has been made. So, that's my view on that, is that he did that purposefully, knowing that he could not stop America from fighting its demons, because, right after that, literally, I mean, the amount of corporations and businesses out there now that are clamoring to see how can I prove to the world that we do not share these same views. So, again, encouraged on one hand, but especially with the upcoming election, now if things should happen in the election that the current administration will stay in power, then I think we're going to be seeing more of these tactics.
Stefan, you mentioned the Navy, and there are two things that come to mind. First, I just want to respond to the end of your statement. You would think that if diversity is something that protects groups that are minorities, and your race is potentially becoming a minority in this country, that you would defend diversity. Cheryl just gave us the stats that there are going to be more children of color emerging. Did you say in 2021, or what year was that?
2020, 50.2% of the population under the age of 18.
Okay, if that's
and then by 2043, the majority of the country will be diverse, or will be minority.
Yeah, all groups together collectively.
Collectively, exactly.
With that being the case, they may want to rethink that. They may need this in the future. So just a thought. But I was speaking with a conservative couple a couple of weeks ago over a virtual dinner, a part of an initiative that we were being a part of. And they're a Black couple, but they are Trump supporters, are a part of the campaign, and served on cabinet with Donald Trump, President Trump. And they were sharing with me, he is a graduate of the Coast Guard. And he asked me if I would just take a rough guess at how many African Americans have graduated from the Coast Guard in its 200 plus year history. And so, he was like, on average, just take a guess. So I'm thinking, I don't know, 20,000, 30,000. Less than 100 African Americans have graduated from the Coast Guard in American history.
Wow.
And he was trying to, and it was like at a certain rank in the Coast Guard. And I can't remember if he was I don't remember what his position was that he held, but he was just saying that it was staggeringly low, the amount of people that had graduated with his rank. And, he was saying the different battles that he fights as a 45-year-old man, trying to really break barriers of racism and things that he's experiencing on an ongoing basis. And, he is as conservative as you get and still dealing with systemic racism. And so I just think it's interesting sometimes what we choose not to see and what we choose not to acknowledge, and the things that we hold on to. It's very interesting of the human condition. But with that, you all have really given us a bit of light on this. And I want to ask, how should this affect our understanding? Because we have a number of people watching today, people that are conservative, people that are liberal, people that are in between, people that don't like to be pegged in a hole and told this is, what you remind me of. But how should this affect human beings all over the country that are looking at voting and making decisions? How should they take information about this and allow that to inform their vote? And anyone can respond.
I think people have to look at what their values are. Look into their heart. What do you really value? What do you prioritize? And compare that against who is running and make your decision based on that.
And I think, Cheryl, too, the ballot is rather hefty this election, with so many positions that have to be filled. And, in terms of our council representatives and education officers, and just all of the in between. There's so many things that are impacting our lives. Understanding diversity. Are there any metrics or websites that give any kind of clarity on where people stand on diversity? Is that any kind of is there any kind of a measure that we could use?
I haven't seen anything.
I haven't either.
I haven't either.
It's a good question, though.
I think that's a good opportunity.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, one thing that that I've been having conversations lately really is about the election and the context of diversity, inclusion, and equity. Um, and I'll tell a small story without trying to give too much away. But I'm working with a group of very intelligent, much more intelligent than me, entrepreneurs who have started business, exited businesses, and we're working on something that I believe is truly not necessarily revolutionary, but will help to bring a lot of this conversation that we're having and to bring it all kind of under not necessarily one umbrella, because obviously there's a lot of umbrellas there, but really to expand the ecosystem and to really have a charge. So in the conversation we're having, I got a call one afternoon from one of the new partners, and he said, Stefan, I'm not sure if I could keep doing this because so and so is on the fence about Donald Trump. I mean, he was really, really broken up about it. He's very, very passionate, and obviously in the context of this story, it will not be casting his vote for President Trump. I had to kind of sat back and we chatted for a while, and I started to tell him about some of my feelings about voting here in America, coming from another country like Jamaica, and then seeing the experience that I've had, and I started to kind of paint a picture for him to say, Americans here, every American has a right to that one vote, and they should exercise it in whichever way their heart tells them to, ultimately. Now, I also told him the story that ultimately, if I had to really sit down and get real with you, I would say that vote, you cast it or you don't cast it, it's your vote. But ultimately, it doesn't matter who you vote for in America. And I don't want that to be the last sentiment I leave here, because again, we're talking about making a conscious decision to vote on what you believe. That if you cast your vote and all those votes are tabulated, and the greater good, I should say the greater good, but all those votes, say for instance, go in this case, say against President Trump, and there's a new administration that comes in. What are the changes that we really feel and believe in our hearts will actually happen here in America? We're 60 years out from the civil rights movement, people. Recognize that change will come very, very slowly. So we have another 60 years to go before we see true systemic change. Now, again, Dexter and Dr. Flowers and a couple of others are involved in the Black Coalition. And we've often talked about that being a lifetime commitment. And that is what it is. I guarantee you, I'm 44, turning 45 years old. I guarantee you, God's willing, if I'm 40 years out from now, that we'll be having similar conversations. We might be having greater smiles and be feeling that we have accomplished some things, but this is a journey. This is a lifelong journey. And your one vote is your one vote. So cast it for whoever you wish. But recognize that the systemic change that we're looking for. Think back to Barack Obama. How great did that feel? Think back, 4 years ago. How did that feel? So again, we know what we're up against here. Cast your vote, cast it well, and be proud that Americans have fought to earn you that vote. But go out there and try try to work with each other, work across the aisles, try to open up somebody's experience to the fact that, you know what, they just weren't, I just did not see that really this system is systemically racist or systemically biased. But it is, that's the fact of it. And if we can open up one person's eye to that, any of us who see and understand that, if we can open up one person's eye, I think we'll be doing a great service. So cast your vote.
No, I certainly agree with what's been said, and I love my country, and I've traveled a lot and worked a lot internationally, and America is the greatest democratic superpower that exists. And quite frankly, I've been very embarrassed at times at how our country has handled things within our country and outside of our country. And I think that when we look at the fact that we live in a global society. I remember years ago, we would say we have an opportunity to impact people from all over the country. Well, now we're impacting people at any time of the day, all over the world. And what happens to democracy in the United States is a ripple effect throughout the world. And I would say, look at how our country has either been brought together or polarized. And as I couldn't have said it any better, Cheryl, vote your values. And if you value the sacredness of the human person, the human experience, I mean, my philosophy as a diversity practitioner is that I believe that each individual is a masterpiece. We're one of a kind. We are walking Michelangelo's David. We are the Mona Lisas. We are unique. And so when we devalue another masterpiece, who are we to be the person that says, this is your price tag. This is how much value you deserve. This is how you deserve to be treated lesser than me. And so for me, understanding how our country has changed, and I won't even say changed, but it's just been more visible, more readily observable. The issues that have happened with the deaths of Black people, women and men in the country at the hand of unjust police officers. I have many in my family that are first responders, and I am sorrowful for how many of them have even been handled and treated. We have to think of ourselves as a country that really has been founded on the ideal of democracy, of value, of recognizing the value of everyone, and the whole melting pot philosophy. We're really vegetable soup. We're not a melting pot. We have all of our individual characteristics that make us a wonderful country. And if we want to maintain that, then you vote the way you feel will help to make that happen. But by all means, do vote, because it is an honor and a privilege that many have fought and died for, to give us this opportunity to have our voice to be heard. And this is your opportunity to help make the world different than it is now, to help make our country what it should be, and to live up to the reputation that others see us outside of this country as. You have that power, it's in your hands.
Phenomenal, phenomenal. I want to just put in one fact check here on this amazing discussion that's transpiring right now. We are well into the second half of this and winding up on time, but I still have a couple questions. Just one adjustment though. As of, I believe, September, Cheryl Thompson became an official advisor for the Black Coalition. So Cheryl is officially involved now too. So I just wanted to clear that up.
Yes.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yes, no, thank you.
Excellent.
Good news.
That is wonderful.
How are government entities being affected by this? Are they being affected in any of the things that you all are hearing? Are there anything that we should be watchful for where you are seeing a retraction of resources, investment, personnel? Is there anything proven that we've seen a decrease?
I have not heard of anything in mass that is happening. I would say what is happening is that there are lots of entities that are coming together, that are coalescing to voice their opinion about it. I do a lot of work with the American Hospital Association's Institute for Diversity and Health Equity, and I believe it was just released today, a letter, and this is a beauty. What I really loved about it is the American Hospital Association, which represents hospitals across the country. It's the American Medical Association, of course, physicians across the country, and the American Nurses Association. They have all come together and wrote a joint letter expressing the catastrophic effect of this executive order and requesting that the president would repeal it. And to me, that is awesome. There are universities and colleges across the country who are doing the same things. This is, I believe, a great opportunity for us to use our civil liberties and to be able to speak to power and speak truth to power and to come together in groups like that to talk about how much each of these groups represent of Americans who are dissatisfied with this executive order. So that has been very encouraging to me.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and to that as well, Dexter, as I mentioned before, my conversation with the Navy, that led me to believe that those initiatives that they were working on were still funded. So, you know, I was asking the questions, I was asking the right questions, and they were saying, well, you know, I mean, that those funds are there, you know, nothing has changed, so to speak. So, you know, and again, you know, I do believe that that memo was done intentionally, and it was really done to kind of, let's see who feels this way in government. And I mean, it's if nothing else, President Trump has been very bold and very honest.
So you think it was a litmus test?
Exactly, exactly. If you recall in the debate, he said, "Stand down, but stand by." So I'm not sure exactly what that meant, but you can take it and kind of mull it over and talk amongst your or small groups together. But you know, there is a plan, and we just need to be very, very aware that you know, language will be used in order to try to throw us off the mark.
So, Dexter, I haven't seen anything on the government side. What I have been seeing, I've lost track. I've been, you know, some Google searches to see what the corporate response has been. And I lost track of all of the different groups that are coming together and making their voices heard. It's really, I'm sorry?
That's a good thing to lose track of.
Yes, yes, yes. So I will say that. I'll also say that, you know, I'm working with one company and they've had their legal department go through our training. It passed everything. They sent it to an external law firm. So there are reviews happening. I've also heard of people just kind of being a little creative on how they're responding to this. So using different language, instead of saying unconscious bias, they're saying conscious inclusion. Using different pots of money to cover training. And then interpreting it as, well, this training is voluntary, it's not mandatory. So we're going to keep moving with it. So that's the response I've seen.
Yeah.
Wow. That's a very intelligent response.
Yeah.
You keep moving the needle as you must.
Yep.
And I think people that are professionals in this space are used to having to navigate things and figure out a plan B, C, D, E, F, G. So
Absolutely. It's called pivoting.
I'm learning that, yes.
And we're in the middle of the pandemic, so we're getting practice.
Oh, yes.
Pivot practice.
Pivot practice, yes.
And Cheryl, you were leaning into a subject that I want to touch before we begin wrapping up, the corporate response. Maybe talk a little bit about that and some of the things that you've noticed and some of the big flagship things that are happening in the corporate response to George Floyd, Armand Arbery, Breonna Taylor, all of the things that have been rolled out this year. I mean, it has been a benchmark phenomenon year in diversity in terms of investment, unlike anything that I think we've ever seen. And maybe just help expound on that a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, just here in Detroit, right after George Floyd's murder, there were 9 CEOs that got together from Detroit and made very strong statements. So you had GM, Ford, FCA, oh my goodness, Blue Cross, who was the other one? Health Alliance Plan, Quicken Loans, Illich Holdings, TCF, right? They all got together and made public statements. And then the media has followed up on that. So 3 months later in September, they wanted to know what has happened. What have you actually done? So that's been very positive. You know, nationwide, that's another area I've lost track of how many corporate CEOs have stood up and made commitments and commitments to not only investing in diversity and inclusion, but closing the socioeconomic gap, making very strong commitments in terms of changing the fabric of their leadership team, changing the demographics of their leadership teams going forward. So, you know, in 10 years, they've got targets of where they want to be. So that's been positive. I would say in my world, you know, I mentioned when the pandemic hit, diversity and inclusion got put to the back burner with the companies I was working with. But in the last 2 months, we have quadrupled our corporate members. So the companies, the C-suites, the CEOs I'm working with are full speed ahead, and they're not turning back.
Yeah, I've seen the same thing. I actually had left my position with the health system and was working as a consultant, which I have done for 20 plus years while working full time. And literally my business kind of just dried up like a raisin because so much of it is training and face to face and doing presentations and so forth. And literally, I'm telling you, George Floyd's death really was a major switch that changed things. And I will tell you, not only have I been approached by recruiters, that universities and health systems that are, you know, recruiting me to come and work for them. But what's also been interesting, because I also still have a very close relationship with the higher education, is that I've got calls from places where I have done health equity series with their students in the allied health professions. And they called and asked me to do town hall meetings because the students want to talk, they're confused, they have feelings. And some of the questions that I asked were, what do you need right now? How are you feeling right now? And we did word cloud. So just to see the words pop up, I'm scared, I don't know what to do. I want to know what to do. I want to know how to be an ally. These are questions and conversations that did not happen before. People just walked past each other in the halls, or if they were in the classrooms, they would sit next to people and not necessarily be engaged. But now they're coming together, they're having conversations. And as I said, it's going to be the millennials that change, that really make the sustainable change that needs to happen. And so I've been so encouraged by hearing terms like allyship and how do I be an ally, and what are the steps, and how do I have those difficult conversations. And so that has been really encouraging to me, as much as the CEOs who are coming out and who are saying, this is not right, this is not good, we're not complicit with what's happening. And we believe that racism is a public health issue. And that to me is very powerful. And so it's statements like that that will help to make the change that we want to see. So I'm very encouraged.
Yeah. And likewise, I'll just finish off here as well. I equally am encouraged, but I do believe again that we have a journey ahead of us. So you know, it's time to really pull together, and you know, we're also getting a lot of a lot of outreaches, a lot of calls from both corporate and higher education as well. Everyone wants to identify themselves as that they're not a racist organization. They're not an organization that currently sees eye to eye with the with the current messaging from our nation's leadership. So yeah, I am encouraged, but we do have our work cut out for us.
Mhm. Yeah, I don't think we'll work ourselves out of a job anytime soon. I think if anything, we need to be replicating ourselves
Yeah.
and creating a pipeline of new diversity leaders that are coming in who have a tenacity. Because I know I always say that this work is not hard work; it's heart work, and it can be exhausting because it's so emotional, and you're really changing attitudes, behaviors, and beliefs. And that's like turning a cruise ship in a bathtub. It takes a
Yeah.
lot of effort and a lot of time. But it is, as Cheryl mentioned before, getting to individuals' values and really helping to peel away the pretense and all of the rhetoric, but really to get to the heart and the core of the matter, which is how do you value human life and how do you value others?
Yeah, you just said something that really resonated with me. Um, this is newer work for me. I've been doing it for a couple of years, and obviously it's gotten a lot more intense over the last couple of months. And I'm exhausted. I'm tired, and that it's emotional work. I think
Yeah.
that's why you just hit on that for me. It's emotional,
Mhm.
and I think we need to keep having conversations. Um, After George Floyd's murder, so I do something weekly. It's called Cadia Connects, and we started it when the pandemic hit to provide community and connection for people. And I had a Black female friend reach out to me after George Floyd's murder and said, "Listen, I'm not okay. We're not okay. Um, the the company I work for hasn't made a statement. They seem tone deaf. Is there something that Cadia could do in terms of providing resources?" So we normally record our calls. We did not record that call. It was very raw, emotional, a lot of tears. I just give the Black people on the call so much credit for opening up and sharing their lived experience, and the white people on the call truly listening, and I think listening in a way they haven't listened before for real change. And then that conversation continued for 2 more weeks.
Mhm.
So I think that's where the change has got to happen. We have to stop fighting. We have to stop this divisive stuff that's going on with people not being willing to hear somebody else's point of view. You don't have to agree with them, and people talking over each other. It's just like, listen. And I think it's PwC that came out with those guidelines. PricewaterhouseCoopers, they have that diversity pledge for action for, oh my gosh, what's it? You know what I'm talking about.
Action.
Thank you. So they came out with the listening guidelines, listening tour guidelines for executives. And what I love about that is the executive's role is just to sit and listen, because they want to jump up and solve everything, right? Or defend. And their role is just to listen. And so I think we just need more listening.
Cheryl, thank you so much for bringing that up. I am guiding us to a close here shortly, but before we go that route, I want to ask, are there any easy strategies that you all have maybe historically done with groups to really help with dialogue? What I'm noticing, especially in the virtual space, we're so connected. And in the connection, sometimes it super saturates our expression to the point where it's overwhelming. And then you also have diversity of thought that has been captivated and polarized at a level that is beyond anything that I think we've ever seen per the political climate. And the way that I see it, it almost feels like people are driving more of a wedge where you're either this or that. And that is just not human. We're a lot more nuanced than that. And so how do you overcome prejudice of thought in terms of imposing a thought on a person to say, you're black and you're this way, or you're Republican and you're this way, you're liberal and you're this way, you're white, you must be this way. What are some things that we could use just as everyday people to use in our lives to make sure that we are addressing our bias, confronting our bias, and letting that kind of rest so that we can speak honestly?
Mhm. There's an activity that I use often. And imagine that all of the participants in the exercise are standing in a circle that has been masked, like masking tape, and they're inside the circle. And the facilitator has masking tape. And so you begin to ask a series of questions like, are you a morning person or are you an evening person? If you're a morning person, come to the right. If you're an evening person, go to the left. And then you put a piece of tape down. And so they've been divided. Then, so is your morning caffeine cold or is it hot? Are you a Coca-Cola drinker or are you a coffee drinker? And then you begin to divide people again. And what you find out is that just in some very basic things, do you sleep with 3 pillows or you don't sleep with a pillow at all? You find out that people have more in common than they have. What's what I'm trying to say? More alike than they are
Different.
Thank you. I'm losing my words. It must be almost 10 o'clock. Well, anyway, the point is that prejudice is all about prejudging. Stereotypes actually came out of the auto industry. The stereotype was traditionally a form that you made things from. So if I'm going to press a bumper of a car, I put the metal into a stereotype to create another metal, a bumper of a car. So it is prejudging, putting attributes on something without very much information. That's what biases are. It's a quick decision that your brain makes before you have full information. And so it is being able to bring people to a place where they have an aha moment. And they may not always verbalize it, but there's a twinkle in the eye. There's a time when they're going to be by themselves. Well, they'll realize that, I never thought that way about that person, or I didn't know that person was like that, or they're so much like me and I thought they were so different. And, I guess one thing that really gets me is that if you strip our skin away, we're all alike. My blood is red just like your blood. My bones are created just like your bones. My organs are just like yours. So literally something as superficial as skin is what really divides us, and perception. So I have been very successful in using very simple ways of demonstrating how we are more alike than we are different. Thank you for that word, Cheryl. More alike than we are different. And I think it's when people have those aha moments and then they have, again, something to find that it's common, and then they have a place to have discussions, because it is that part that when we keep ourselves separated from people that are like us, we never get to know who they are. We never get to truly have more information to have a really well-rounded, comprehensive understanding of who that other person is.
Yeah, I love what you said. And I would just add, Dexter, you've done such a great job of creating this safe space for us. And Dr. Flowers, what you just talked about puts people in, kind of sets them up for conversation. You kind of laid the foundation, you've laid the groundwork. Now it's safe to have the conversation. I think the next step is grace. So that space and grace, because when we have these conversations, we're probably going to say something wrong, but making sure it's okay and we're learning from that. So I love the space and grace.
Phenomenal, phenomenal. So in closing, I want to ask the both of you, Stefan had to jump off. Of course, you saw he's got 2 beautiful kiddos and he's being dad right now.
Sure.
But he does send his regards for having to get off early, and says thanks to the both of you for being a part of this tonight. In closing, I want to do the final word. And with final word, you are given one word to describe where you would like to see the world headed in 2021. What is a word that describes what you would like to see in terms of diversity, equity, inclusion, humanity, what we can do to be better as a people? What would that word be for you?
The word that comes to mind for me is brave.
That's a good one.
I believe my word would be value.
Well, folks, you heard it. Brave and value. We're going to be brave going out of 2020 into 2021, taking the opportunities to be diverse and equitable and inclusive in our work environments, and value. We're going to place that value on one another and on our interactions one to another. I want to say thank you, Dr. Flowers. Thank you so much.
My pleasure.
Cheryl, thank you so much. And Stefan, thank you so much for being with us tonight. Your experiences and the perspective that you brought was invaluable, and we are better because of it. I want to encourage everyone that's listening, go to theblac.co. That's theblac.co. And that's where you can go to keep in touch with us and to hear more conversations like this. We are in our series, Get Out the Vote, and we will be coming up next week with another series of conversations dealing with the electoral power of the Black church. And we have speakers, including Dr. Cindy Trim, Pastor Jamal Bryant, Pastor Keon Henderson, Bishop Charles Ellis, and so many others that are going to be with us. It's going to be a phenomenal week of discussion almost every night leading up to the election. So definitely mark your calendars for that. And if you'd like to keep up with us, you can sign up on our email list at theblac.co, and we would love to keep in touch with you. Again, everyone, thank you so much. And to our guest panelists, thank you for being with us tonight. We appreciate you.
Thank you. Thank you for your work.
Yeah.
Have a great
care.
night.
Bye-bye.
Bye.